This week, California crossed a line it can't easily uncross. One refinery decision, announced quietly but felt immediately, just slammed the door on cheap gasoline for millions of drivers. And if you live in California or anywhere that depends on California's fuel system, you're about to pay for it every single time you pull up to the pump. I'm Alex Lawson, and before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, hit that like button, and share this video. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't a talking point or a rumor. It's the real physical reality of how gasoline is made, moved, and priced, and why California may have just pushed itself past the point of no return. Let's start with what actually happened. In late 2025, one of California's remaining major refineries confirmed it would permanently shut down a significant portion of its gasoline production. Not temporarily, not for maintenance, permanently. The facility, which had been processing roughly 140,000 barrels per day of crude oil into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, announced that ongoing regulatory pressure, compliance costs, and declining long-term profitability made continued operation impossible. That single decision wiped out roughly 8% of California's in-state refining capacity overnight. Let that sink in. 8% may not sound catastrophic at first, but California is not Texas. California does not have spare capacity sitting around. It does not have pipelines bringing in gasoline from the Gulf Coast, and it does not have a flexible fuel system that can quickly adapt when something goes wrong. California is what energy analysts call a fuel island. Almost all the gasoline you burn in your car has to be produced inside the state or arrive by tanker ship. There is no pipeline network connecting California to the massive refining hub along the Gulf Coast. There is no easy way to backfill lost production. When a refinery goes down in California, the supply hole doesn't get filled in days. It gets filled in weeks or months, and usually at much higher cost. Now, here's where this gets even more serious. Back in the early 1980s, California had more than 30 operating refineries. By 2000, that number had dropped to around 20. By 2015, it was down to 15. As of early 2025, before this latest closure, California was operating just 14 refineries, many of them running flat out with little room for error. Now, subtract one more. This isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. That lost capacity represents roughly 6 million gallons of fuel per day, fuel that commuters use to get to work, fuel that truckers use to deliver groceries, fuel that emergency services rely on, fuel that keeps California's economy moving. When that supply disappears, demand doesn't magically vanish with it. People still drive, goods still need to move, airlines still need jet fuel, and when demand stays the same but supply shrinks, prices don't politely rise, they spike. You've seen this movie before. In the summer of 2022, when a single refinery fire knocked out production in Northern California, gas prices jumped more than $1 per gallon in some regions within weeks. Not because of greed, not because of speculation, because the system had no slack. This time, the loss is permanent, and that's why the governor's reaction has been so intense. Publicly, state leaders have expressed outrage. They've accused oil companies of abandoning Californians. They've promised investigations. They've floated new penalties, new oversight boards, new price controls. In press conferences, the tone has been almost combative, as if this closure came out of nowhere. But if you follow the timeline, this outcome was warned about for years. Go back to 2019 when California expanded its low carbon fuel standard and tightened emissions rules on in state refineries. At the time, multiple operators submitted formal comments warning that compliance costs were rising faster than margins. Several refiners explicitly said that long-term investment in California facilities no longer made economic sense. In 2021, after pandemic demand collapsed and then snapped back faster than expected, refineries across the state were already struggling to keep up. Maintenance was deferred, staffing was reduced, capital upgrades were postponed. Then in 2023 and 2024, new proposals emerged targeting refinery profits, mandating minimum inventory levels, and threatening penalties if companies failed to keep gasoline prices in line with state expectations. From a political perspective, these policies sounded tough and consumer friendly. From an operational perspective, they added uncertainty to an already fragile system. Energy analysts warned that refineries don't respond to pressure by producing more, they respond by leaving. By early 2025, several companies had already converted facilities to renewable diesel, which sounds green on paper but reduces gasoline output. Others announced they would not invest further in aging California assets. And now, here we are. The closure pushed the system into a new phase, one where California cannot realistically return to self sufficiency even if leaders wanted to. Here's why. Building a new refinery in California is effectively impossible under current law. Permitting alone can take more than a decade. Environmental review lawsuits can drag on indefinitely. Financing is nearly unattainable because investors know policy risk is high and demand is politically targeted to decline. Even expanding existing refineries is extraordinarily difficult. Many facilities are hemmed in by urban development. Others face air quality caps that prevent throughput increases, so once capacity is gone, it's gone. That leaves imports. As of 2010, California imported roughly 5% of its gasoline. By 2020, that number had climbed closer to 10%. After recent closures and conversions, analysts estimate imports could exceed 20% within the next 2 years and climb even higher during peak summer months. Most of that gasoline doesn't come from nearby states. It comes from Asia, the Middle East, and occasionally Europe. Think about the irony here. California has some of the strictest climate policies in the world, yet to replace lost in state production, it now relies on tanker ships that burn heavy bunker fuel, traveling 30 to 40 days across the Pacific Ocean, carrying gasoline refined under looser environmental standards. That imported gasoline then has to meet California's unique CARBOB fuel blend requirements, which only a limited number of foreign refineries can produce. That constraint alone adds a premium of 30 to 50 cents per gallon compared to conventional gasoline. And if anything disrupts shipping, weather, geopolitical tensions, port congestion, prices spike even further. This is why California gasoline already averages $1.50 to $2 per gallon above the national average. Not because stations want to charge more, because the supply chain costs more at every step. Now layer on the loss of another major refinery. According to one energy consulting firm, the closure could add 25 to 40 cents per gallon during normal conditions and far more during disruptions. For the average California driver, that translates to an additional $400 to $700 per year just to drive the same number of miles. For families already struggling with rent, groceries, and utilities, that matters. For small businesses with vehicle fleets, it's brutal. For truckers, it cuts directly into margins. And the ripple effects don't stop at the pump. Higher fuel costs raise the price of everything that moves: food, construction materials, consumer goods. Even electricity costs rise when natural gas infrastructure competes with fuel logistics. This is how energy policy quietly reshapes an economy. What makes this moment different and why so many analysts say California has no way back is that the structural damage is now baked in. Once refineries shut down, skilled workers leave, supply chains dissolve, equipment is dismantled or repurposed, the institutional knowledge disappears. Restarting that capacity isn't like flipping a switch. Meanwhile, demand declines far slower than politicians project. Even aggressive electric vehicle adoption still leaves tens of millions of gasoline powered cars on the road for decades. Trucks, heavy equipment, aviation, and shipping all remain heavily dependent on liquid fuels. So you end up with a shrinking supply serving a still massive demand base. That is a recipe for volatility. And here's the uncomfortable truth that often gets lost in the shouting. This isn't about villainous companies or incompetent officials. It's about physics, economics, and infrastructure. Refineries are expensive. They require long-term certainty. They operate on thin margins. When policy signals say, "You are not wanted here and your future demand will be regulated out of existence," companies don't fight forever. They exit. When they exit, the system doesn't become cleaner or cheaper. It becomes more fragile. You can hear the frustration in the governor's response because this closure exposed a contradiction that can no longer be ignored. California wants the benefits of fuel availability without the reality of fuel production. It wants low prices without supply investment. It wants independence without infrastructure. And markets don't work that way. Other states are watching closely. Arizona, Nevada, and even parts of Oregon depend on California's refineries for fuel. As capacity tightens, those states become collateral damage. They pay higher prices despite having little say in California's policy decisions. This is how regional fuel crises spread. So, where does this leave you? In the short term, expect more volatility. Expect sharper spikes during maintenance season. Expect summer blends to hit harder. Expect imported gasoline to set the marginal price more often. In the long term, unless policy changes dramatically, California's gasoline prices are likely to remain structurally higher than the rest of the country, not by pennies, but by dollars. And the real test isn't whether leaders can express anger or assign blame. The real test is whether anyone is willing to acknowledge the trade offs they've created, because once refining capacity is gone, speeches don't bring it back. If you want more investigative breakdowns like this, explaining how energy policy turns into real world prices, make sure you're subscribed, leave a comment, and tell me what gas costs where you live right now. And share this video with anyone who still thinks refinery closures don't affect them. Because the pump doesn't care about politics, it only reflects reality